myself as one of those Christmas cracker riddle writers. What a great job that would be. Anyway, here's one that I made up all by myself just yesterday. Question: what do you call the most successful American female swimmer of all time? Answer: a man. This week in Washington, Paula Scanlon, a young woman whose entire childhood had been devoted towards her goal of being a swimming champion, and indeed she holds the New England Independent School League record in the 400-yard freestyle relay, a record which still stands. She got it in 2017. Well, she gave testimony to the House Judiciary Committee hearings, which are entitled "The Dangers and Due Process Violations of Gender-Affirming Care." These hearings have been set up to examine and expose how children are being coerced by adults in positions of authority into life-altering gender transition procedures. Paula Scanlon explained how her own ambitions and experiences as a top-level female swimmer changed dramatically, and dramatically for the worse, the day the well-known transgender swimming athlete Lia Thomas, who was, of course, born and indeed competed in swimming all the way through school as a biological male, Will Thomas, joined the girls' team.
In September of 2021, Lia Thomas began participating as a member of the Penn women's team. Lia, formerly Will, had personal best times in every freestyle event that were faster than the women's world records. Once the season began, Thomas was leading the country in multiple events, while only placing in the top 500 in those events on the men's team. Thomas later became an NCAA champion in the 500-yard freestyle, the first NCAA champion in our women's team history program.
Clearly, and as we have discussed many times on the show, one of the tragic outcomes of the radical transgender, gender fluidity, 54 genders theory nonsense that has been foisted on our unsuspecting and gullible school kids and their parents in Western societies has been the way allowing biological boys, men, to compete with girls and women has been devastating to the dreams and ambitions of those aspiring young athletes. Many girls have simply abandoned sports out of a sense of futility. But it's not just the medals they may miss out on that is the real nightmare facing these distraught young women.
My teammates and I were forced to undress in the presence of Lia, a 6'4" tall biological male, fully intact with male genitalia, 18 times per week. Some girls opted to change in bathroom stalls, and others used the family bathroom to avoid this. When we tried to voice our concerns to the athletic department, we were told that Lia's swimming and being in our locker room was a non-negotiable, and we were offered psychological services to attempt to re-educate us to become comfortable with the idea of undressing in front of a male.
Whoa, quote, "We were offered psychological services to attempt to re-educate us to become comfortable with the idea of undressing in front of a male." Let that sink in. Imagine if that was your daughter. This is the modern left, non-negotiable, writ large. Whether it is to do with gender or race or colonial history or sexuality, the modern authoritarian left impose their collective ideology, wokeness, and it's non-negotiable. And then if you disagree, well, you are the problem, and you need psychological re-educating. In this case, effectively brainwashing young girls to feel comfortable undressing in front of a naked grown man. Now, what does that remind you of? Oh yes, students of real as opposed to fake history, which therefore excludes pretty much anyone under 40 in Australia, will immediately recognize that those are the very tactics employed by Mao Zedong and the Communist Party of China during their cultural revolution, by Pol Pot in Kampuchea, by Stalin and other evil communist despots. Psychological treatment to cure you of your wrong thinking. Here's commentator James Lindsay.
And so this is my thesis when we say, what is woke? Woke is Maoism with American characteristics.
The clue here is that in the world of woke, or the modern Maoism, the individual must bow to the will of the collective as determined by the cultural elites. You see, this is a complete perversion of democracy. Take transgenderism. We've always had transgender people, transgender pop stars, transgender characters like Aladdin Sane, transgender individuals. Lou Reed famously sang in Walk on the Wild Side about Candy, who shaved his legs so he was a she. The most famous of all, Ray Davies, witty, written and brilliant Lola.
Well, I'm not dumb, but I can't understand why she walked like a woman but talked like a man. Oh my Lord, la 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 la.
You see, there is nothing new about transgenderism, kids. Nothing. The difference is the political environment you are now in. Back in the 1970s, the left predominantly, but also many on the right, believed not only in free speech, but also in its twin ideology of libertarianism, which was essentially the idea that so long as they are not harming anyone else, adult individuals should be free to do whatever they like, especially in the privacy of their own home. In a libertarian world, where the emphasis is on the individual, transgenderism was fine and caused barely any ripples. But we don't live in that world any longer. The left here and throughout the West, having successfully taken over all our major institutions, have done precisely what Marx and Lenin instructed them to do, which is to abandon individual rights and impose collective leftist authoritarianism. Now, instead of the individual being free, the individual must bow to whatever the authoritarian collective left demands. Which means, because the authoritarian left have decreed that women can be men and men can be women, the whole of society must change and bend to the will of the authoritarian elite. Pronouns, changing rooms, school uniforms, fashion, sports, toilets, everything, control, control, control. The reconstruction of our entire society to meet the ideological demands of a handful of cultural radicals. This is Orwell's nightmare come to life, where girls must be re-educated to feel comfortable with being naked in front of a grown man. Society must bend to the will of the collective, or else.
To sum up the university's response, we, the women, were the problem, not the victims. We were expected to conform, to move over, and shut up. Our feelings didn't matter. The university was gaslighting and fear-mongering women to validate the feelings and identity of a male. As an attempt to voice my concern about the situation we were forced into, revealing the unjust and unfair treatment, I wrote an op-ed for the Daily Pennsylvanian, the student-run newspaper. The Daily Pennsylvanian published my article on the evening of February 10th, 2022. Only a few hours later, my piece was retracted. I was given no notice nor reasoning. Again, I was silenced for my dissenting viewpoint and felt my First Amendment rights were denied by my university.
Yes, the collective left will silence you, crush you, through every tool at their disposal, which is all of them. The mainstream media are now our censors. Universities are now our intellectual gulags. Left-wing ideology is now our persecutor, our inquisitor. Language has become our jailer, where say the wrong thing and you are branded hateful, cast out. But despite all the crushing power of the left, nothing can change the simple reality. Biologically, it is simply not possible to change your sex.
There is a 0%, there's a 100% failure rate for sex change operations, isn't there? Because it's not possible to change your sex?
That's right.
100% failure rate for these procedures.
That's right. You can't change your sex.
Can't change your sex. But the left constantly tells us you can change your gender. 2 + 2 = 5. But as with all totalitarian systems, what begins as a collective fantasy for the greater good swiftly ends up doing unbelievable, permanent physical and mental harm to the dissenting individual.
What's bigoted and hateful is the discrimination against women and the efforts to erase women and our equal opportunities, dignity, and safe spaces. One might ask, why do I speak so passionately about issues that seem hypothetical, or some may perceive as only impacting a small number of women? This is not hypothetical. This is real. I know women who have lost roster spots and spots on the podium. I know of women with sexual trauma who are adversely impacted by having biological males in their locker room without their consent. I know this because I am one of these women.
Paula Scanlon then details her own sexual assault when she was 16 and how, therefore, having a naked male with her in the changing rooms understandably freaks her out. That's mental damage and it's bad enough. But you might have noticed during those clips the beautiful young 19-year-old girl sitting next to Paula on the right. Her name is Chloe Cole. We've mentioned her before on the show. Rita did a brilliant interview with her a few months ago. As a young teenager, Chloe Cole was medically transitioned. I would say mutilated, others may choose different language, to turn her into a boy. And then last year, Chloe changed her mind. I mean, who'd have guessed a rebellious teenager grows up a little and changes their mind about their identity? What an extraordinary occurrence. Never happened before in human history. Unsurprisingly, Chloe is one of a growing army of de-transitioners, and her story is almost too cruel and too sadistic to bear. And I warn you, the details are horrific. But this is what many left-wing parents, left-wing teachers, left-wing academics, left-wing politicians, and left-wing doctors are foisting on our children as we speak.
After my breasts were taken away from me, the tissue was incinerated. Before I was able to legally drive, I had a huge part of my future womanhood taken from me. I will never be able to breastfeed. I struggle to look at myself in the mirror at times. I still struggle to this day with sexual dysfunction. And I have massive scars across my chest, and the skin grafts that they took of my nipples are weeping fluid today, and they were grafted into a more masculine positioning, they said. After surgery, my grades in school plummeted. Everything that I went through did nothing to address my underlying mental health issues that I had. And my doctors, with their theories on gender, thought that all my problems would go away as soon as I was surgically transformed into something that vaguely resembled a boy. Their theories were wrong. The drugs and surgeries changed my body, but they did not and could not change the basic reality that I am and forever will be a female.
And how does this grotesque assault on a young woman occur? It's all political. As I said, it's the teachers, it's the parents, it's the specialists, it's the grown-ups who these poor children trust. Make no mistake, the root cause of the dogma and ideology is the ideology of the modern left. It is the sick creed of the left that says to parents, quote, "You can either have a dead daughter or a live transgender son." That is to blame.
When my specialist first told my parents that they could have a dead daughter or a live transgender son, I wasn't suicidal. I was a happy child who struggled because she was different. However, at 16, after my surgery, I did become suicidal. I'm doing better now. But my parents almost got the dead daughter promised to them by my doctors. My doctors had almost created the very nightmare they said they were trying to avoid.
What an absolute disgrace. Yet if you try and warn about this nightmare, as has happened to us repeatedly here on this show, as has happened to many brave women like Moira Deeming or Catherine Deves, Holly Lawford Smith, J.K. Rowling and others, you are branded hateful and transphobic. Ooh. Our spineless, cowardly political leaders and bureaucrats who earn hundreds of thousands, close to $1 million a year, won't even answer the question, what is a woman?
Can someone please provide me with a definition of what a woman is? Department of Health. Definition of a man, definition of a woman. Anyone?
Pretty basic.
Basic stuff. Professor Murphy.
I think there are a variety of definitions, and I think
Just a simple one.
Perhaps to give a more fulsome answer, we should take that on notice.
You're gonna
Sweaty palms. Well, Professor Murphy and all those other cowardly public servants and politicians sitting there on their hands, you peddlers of cultural Marxism, let me make it really easy for you. Chloe Cole is a woman. A damaged but very brave woman. Paula Scanlon is a woman. A traumatized but very brave woman. Leah Thomas is a man who wants to be a woman, but biologically never can be one. Does that help you?
My childhood was ruined along with thousands of detransitioners that I know through our networks. This needs to stop. You alone can stop it. Enough children have already been victimized by this barbaric pseudoscience. Please.
That is a woman. Future